You know, when the headline hits the news, bam,
Yeah.
the finance ministry is the worst culprit when it comes to irregularities.
Yeah.
The first thing that comes into the mind of every individual is virtually corruption.
Yeah.
Virtually corruption. Finance ministry is involved in some corrupt activities, but it could be a matter of a component of some activities, maybe misapplication, maybe it has to do with some collection of money from some places. That necessarily does not translate into corruption.
Okay, so there's no point in a report where we mention corruption. So people interpret it any way that they want.
Exactly.
And I mean, it's been communicated as if these are, yes, some monies have been lost because I mentioned that some financial values and the social costs can never be recovered.
True.
You understand? Yes.
True.
Although we understand that if you read the report in detail, we mention them as clear tax irregularities. I'm sure maybe it's a key that we may have to indicate. And once we capture it as irregularities, you should communicate that. And I accept your recommendation that going into the future, when we talk about these irregularities, maybe we also, the media will help us and explain that these tax irregularities mean this and that.
So the key must capture what goes into your tax framework.
It's clear in the report.
So it's clear in the main report.
The main report is there.
I'll be glad to read that report.
And so I think you touched on the fiscal recklessness and mentioned the Ministry of Finance. So let me also
that's what I'm coming to.
All right.
So I see that you attempt to rank those who performed better and those who performed bad with color coding and all of that. Explain that bit to me.
Okay, so if you look at the red coding, these are the most fiscally reckless institution. And if you say fiscally reckless, that's the institution that recorded relatively higher irregularities compared to the other MDs. And over the period, except for 2020, the Ministry of Finance was consistently the most fiscally reckless institution. That is, it recorded the highest financial irregularities. And let me add that the Ministry of Finance performs a dual role. Apart from its role as a ministry, just like any other ministry like roads, transport, and other agencies, the Ministry of Finance is also the central management agency. That is, it performs supervisory role on all other ministries. So roads ministry may be embarking on a project, but its management is under the Ministry of Finance. So irregularities will be traced to the Ministry of Finance. And in our conversation, you realize that cash and tax irregularities are the main drivers of the financial irregularities, and they are managed by two key institutions, Controlling Accountants General Department and Ghana Revenue Authority. These two agencies technically are departments under Ministry of Finance, and so their irregularities, looking at how the Auditor General presents it, are now summed up under the Ministry of Finance. That's why the Ministry of Finance consistently is the most reckless institution. And it is quite telling that if you compare the Ministry of Finance's irregularities to the next fiscally reckless, that's Ministry of Health, the gap is about 70 points. That's about 70% difference. This is about 0.8 on the index score, and the next reckless is about 0.1, which tells us that the tax and cash irregularities are significant drivers, and it is about time we implement measures to address them. Because if you look at that gap, it tells you that the ministry that is always managing these two things would definitely lead the pack when it comes to this recklessness. And so the top 5 recklessness ministries are Ministry of Finance, Health, Roads and Highways, Employment and Foreign Affairs. But what I must also add is that, you see, if you look at the ranking, the yellow grading quite dominates the whole ranking. It tells you that the recklessness permeates every aspect of our public administration when you look at the ministries, department and agencies. Then again, the greens, the few greens we have, what it explains is that these ministries appear not to be project-led ministries. They are basically admin-based. And also, let me say, complementary ministries like information, chieftaincy, and others. That's why they may appear to be less fiscally reckless. However, the recklessness is quite dominant, or it appears that it's happening in every aspect of the work of our ministries, department and agencies. But the main center of the recklessness is at the Ministry of Finance, its department and agencies.